I'm in my 20s, and while I don't consider myself rich, financially, I think I'm in a pretty good position for my age. And that's not because I found some secret investment or made one huge financial decision. It's because I've built a few habits around money that I've consistently followed since I started working full time. Now, a quick disclaimer as usual, this is not financial advice, I'm not a financial advisor, this is purely for educational purposes only. So in this video, I'm going to go through the 5 money habits that I think have put me ahead in my 20s. And none of them are particularly complicated. In fact, most of them are pretty boring, but I think that's kind of the point. The first habit is investing in my education. And I'm not just talking about going to college or university, I'm talking about continually investing in myself and developing skills that can increase my earning potential. I spent money on my education because I viewed it as an investment rather than just an expense. And for me, that's paid off in a few different ways. First, obviously, education can help you qualify for higher paying jobs, which it did for me. The skills and knowledge that you develop can make you more valuable in the job market. But for me, it also goes beyond my main job. I've developed skills that I can use for side hustles and freelance work, and I've done that through courses or even YouTube. For example, one of my side hustles is graphic design, and I've been doing that for many, many years. I started when I was around 15 years old, and I never necessarily went to school for it. I did a class for it when I was in high school, but at that point I already knew more than the class was teaching because I had just been watching YouTube videos for so many years before that. And there are other skills outside of graphic design like digital marketing, social media work, and other things outside of my regular job that I was able to learn. And that's important because I don't think building wealth is only about cutting expenses. There's a limit to how much you can save, but there's potentially a much higher ceiling on how much you can earn. So for example, if you make $50,000 a year, you can try to cut your expenses by $5,000. But if you develop skills that allow you to eventually make, 60,000, 70,000, 80,000 or more dollars a year, you've increased the amount of money you have available to save and invest. So I think one of the best investments you can make in your 20s is in yourself. But there's an important distinction. Obviously, don't just spend money on education because you think having another degree automatically makes you more valuable. Think about the actual return you're expecting from that investment. So what skill are you developing? What opportunities could it create? What connections do you get from it? Could it increase your income? Could you use it for a side hustle? And that's how I think about education. The second habit is probably the biggest one, which is I started investing early. As soon as I got my first full-time job, I started putting money into investments. And one of the biggest things I've done since then is increase those investments whenever my income increased. So when I got a raise, I didn't think, great, now I can spend more money. I thought, great, now I can invest more money. And that's what I mean when I say I pay myself first. Instead of spending my entire paycheck and investing whatever happens to be left over, I invest first and then live off of what's left. And I think that's a really important psychological difference. Because if you tell yourself you're going to invest whatever is left at the end of the month, there's a pretty good chance that there won't be much left. There's always something you can spend money on, but if investing happens first, it becomes part of your normal expenses. It's just something that I do. And over time, I've increased the amount I'm investing as my salary has increased. And that has allowed me to take advantage of something incredibly powerful, which is time. The earlier you invest, the longer your money has to potentially compound. And I think that's one of the biggest advantages you have in your 20s. You don't necessarily have a ton of money yet, but you have something arguably more valuable, which is decades. Many, many, many years. The third habit is that I try to only buy things that I actually need. And I want to be careful with how I explain this because I'm not saying you should never buy anything you want. I buy things I don't need. I go out to eat. I buy things that I enjoy. I'm not trying to live the most miserable life possible so I can have the biggest investment account. I'm trying to be realistic. The difference is that I try to be intentional about what I spend money on. If I see something and my first thought is, that would be cool to have, I'll usually think about it before actually buying it. Do I actually want this? Is it going to make my life better? Am I going to use it? Or do I just want it because I saw somebody else with it or I thought it looked cool? Because I think that's where a lot of unnecessary spending comes from. We're always constantly being shown things we're supposed to want. A nicer car, a nicer watch, a nicer house, new clothes, the newest iPhone that's come out. And if you let every increase in your income turn into an increase in your spending, you can make significantly more money without actually getting much wealthier because there isn't that gap between what you make and what you spend. That's lifestyle inflation. And I've tried to avoid that as much as possible. When I make more money, I don't want my expenses to automatically increase by the same amount. I'd rather invest the difference, or invest as much of the difference as I can. I actually learned a pretty expensive version of this lesson with my car. When I needed a new car, I wanted something nicer. I wasn't buying a luxury vehicle, but I definitely cared about how the car looked. And I ended up taking out a loan with a relatively high interest rate and owing significantly more than the vehicle was actually worth. For a long time, I focused on the biweekly payment. I was thinking, can I afford this payment? But that's really not the right question to be asking. The better question is, how much is this actually going to cost me? Because a monthly payment or a biweekly payment can make an expensive purchase feel affordable. You can stretch a loan out over many years and convince yourself that because you can make the payment, you can afford the car. But you're still paying for it. And you're potentially paying thousands of dollars in interest and going into negative equity. That experience made me much more conscious about the things I buy. I don't want to spend money just because I technically can. I'd rather ask whether the purchase is actually worth giving up the money. The fourth habit is automating my investments. This one is incredibly simple, but I honestly think it's one of the most powerful. I don't want to have to make the decision every month or every week, should I invest this month? Should I invest this week? Because eventually life happens, right? You get busy, you have unexpected expenses, you spend more than you planned, and suddenly you skipped investing for a month or 2 months or 3 months, however long. Instead, I want investing to happen automatically. Money goes into my investment accounts consistently, so I don't have to rely on motivation or me just remembering. And I think that's an important lesson in personal finance. You don't want your financial future to depend on how disciplined you feel that day. Building systems that make these decisions easier is just vital. If you get paid and your investments happen automatically, you don't even have to think about it. And then you can live off the money that's left, right? That's another part of paying yourself first. The fifth and final habit is understanding tax-advantaged accounts. And this is particularly important if you're in Canada. One of the biggest examples is the TFSA, or the tax-free savings account. I believe the Roth IRA is the equivalent in America, but don't quote me on that. And the name can actually be a little misleading because it's not just a savings account. You can use a tax-free savings account to hold investments, and the growth and withdrawals can be tax-free under the applicable rules. And then there's also the FHSA, which is the first-time homebuyer savings account, I believe is what it's called, which I used to purchase my first house. And that can be incredibly valuable for eligible first-time homebuyers because it actually provides tax advantages while you're saving towards a qualifying first home. And the important lesson here isn't just, use a tax-free savings account. It's to actually understand the accounts that are available to you where you live and what their tax advantages are. Because if you're going to invest anyways, the account you choose can make a massive difference over decades. You don't necessarily need to find some amazing, magical investment. Sometimes simply putting the investments you already want to own into the right account can make a meaningful difference. And I think this is one of the easiest financial advantages to overlook. The government has literally created accounts with specific tax advantages. So learn how they work, understand the contribution rules, understand what you can hold inside them, and then actually utilize them. So those are the 5 habits that I think have put me ahead in my 20s. 1, invest in yourself. 2, invest early and pay yourself first. 3, only buy things you actually need. 4th, automate your investments. And then finally, the 5th and final tip, understand and take advantage of tax-advantaged accounts. None of these are particularly exciting, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video. And I'm not telling you to find the next cryptocurrency that's going to 100x. I'm not telling you to get rich overnight. I'm talking about boring, repeatable habits, and I think that's what makes them powerful. Because building wealth isn't usually about one huge decision that you make. It's usually about making a bunch of good decisions over and over and over again for years. So if you're in your 20s, you have an advantage that you can't get back later, which is time. You don't need to be rich right now as much as you want to. I would love to be as well. You just need to start building the habits that will make your future self better off. Invest in yourself, pay yourself first, avoid unnecessary lifestyle inflation, automate your investments, and understand which financial tools are available to you where you live. Because the habits you build in your 20s can and will follow you for decades. And that's why I think these 5 habits have put me ahead in mine. So that's it for the video today, guys. If you enjoyed this type of content, please feel free to subscribe, and if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.